The old man sat in his gas station on a cold Christmas Eve. He hadn't been anywhere in years since his wife had passed away. It was just another day to him. He didn't hate Christmas, just couldn't find a reason to celebrate. He was sitting there looking at the snow that had been falling for the last hour and wondering, what is it all about? When the door opened and a homeless man stepped through. Instead of throwing the man out, old George, as he was known by his customers, told the man to come and sit by the heater and warm up. "Oh, thank you, but I don't mean to intrude," said the stranger. I see you're busy. I'll just go." "Not without something hot in your belly," George said. He turned and opened a wide-mouthed thermos and handed it to the stranger. "Ain't much, but it's hot and tasty. It's stew. Made it myself. And when you're done, there's coffee, and it's fresh." Just at that moment, he heard the ding of the driveway bell. "Excuse me, I'll be right back," George said. There in the driveway was an old '53 Chevy, steam rolling out of the front. The driver was panicked. "Mister, can you help me?" said the driver with a deep Spanish accent. "My wife is with child, and my car is broken." George opened the hood. It was bad. The block looked cracked from the cold, and the car was, dead. "You ain't going anywhere in this thing," George said as he turned away. "But, mister, please help." The door of the office closed behind George as he went inside. He went to the office wall and got the keys to his old truck and went back outside. He walked around the building, opened the garage, started the truck, and drove it around to where the couple was waiting. "Here, take my truck. She ain't the best thing you ever looked at, but she runs real good." George helped put the woman in the truck and watched as they sped off into the night. He turned and walked back inside the office. "I'm glad I gave them the truck. Their tires are shot, too. That old truck has brand new." George thought he was talking to the stranger, but the man had gone. The thermos was on the desk, empty, with a used coffee cup beside it. "Well, at least he got something in his belly," George thought. George went back outside to see if that old Chevy would start. It cranked slowly, but it started. He pulled it into the garage where the truck had been. He thought, well, he'd tinker with it for something to do. Christmas Eve meant no customers. He discovered that the block hadn't cracked. It was just the bottom hose in the radiator. "Well, shoot, I can fix this," he said to himself. So he put a new one on, and everything was fine. But those tires ain't going to get him through the winter, though. He took the snow treads off of his wife's old Lincoln. They were like new, and, well, he wasn't going to drive that car anyway. As he was working, he heard shots being fired. He ran outside, and beside a police car, there lay an officer on the cold ground, bleeding from his left shoulder. "Please help me," the officer moaned. Well, George helped the officer inside, as he remembered the training he'd received in the Army as a medic. He knew the wound needed attention. Pressure to stop the bleeding, he thought. The uniform company had been there that morning and had left clean shop towels. He used those and duct tape to bind the wound. "Hey, I say duct tape can fix anything," trying to make the policeman feel at ease. Now he needs something for the pain, George thought. Well, all he had was the pills he used for his back. Well, these ought to work. He put some water in a cup and gave the policeman the pills and said, "You hang in there. I'm going to go get you an ambulance." He picked up the phone, but the line was dead. "Well, maybe I can get one of your buddies on that there talk box out there in your car." He went out, only to find that a bullet had gone into the dashboard, destroying the two-way radio. He went back in to find the policeman sitting up. "Thanks," said the officer. "You could have left me there. The guy that shot me is still out there." George sat down beside him. "You know, I never left an injured man in the Army. I ain't going to leave you now." George pulled back the bandage to check for the bleeding. "You know, it looks worse than what it is. That bullet passed right through you. Good thing it missed the important stuff. I think with time you're going to be right as rain." George got up and poured a cup of coffee. "How do you take it?" he asked. "None for me," said the officer. "Oh, you're going to drink this. It's the best in the city. And too bad I ain't got no donuts." Well, the officer laughed and winced at the same time. Then the front door of the office flew open. In a burst, a young man with a gun came in. "Give me all your money. Do it now," the young man yelled. His hand was shaking, and George could tell that, well, he'd never done anything like this before. "That's the guy that shot me," exclaimed the officer. "Son, why are you doing this?" asked George. "You need to put that cannon away. Somebody else might get hurt." Well, the young man was confused. "Shut up, old man, or I'll shoot you too. Now, give me the cash." The cop was reaching for his gun. "Put that thing away," George said to the police officer. "We got one too many of them in here right now as it is." He turned his attention to the young man. "Look, son, it's Christmas Eve. If you need money, well, then here. It ain't much, but it's all I got. Now put that pea shooter away." George pulled $150 out of his pocket, handing it to the young man, reaching for the barrel of the gun at the same time. The young man released his grip on the gun, fell to his knees, and began to cry. "I'm not very good at this, am I? All I wanted was to buy something for my wife and my son. I lost my job, my rent's due, my car got repossessed last week." George handed the gun to the cop. "Well, son, we all get in a bit of a squeeze now and then. Road gets hard sometimes, but, well, we make it through the best we can." He got the young man to his feet and sat him down on a chair across from the cop. "You know, sometimes we do stupid things, boy," handing the young man a cup of coffee. "Being stupid's one of the things that makes us human. Coming in here with a gun ain't the answer now. Sit there and get warm, and we're going to sort this thing out." The young man had stopped crying. He looked over to the cop. "Sorry I shot you. It just went off. I'm sorry, officer." "Shut up and drink your coffee," the cop said. George could hear the sound of sirens outside. A police car and an ambulance skidded to a halt. Two cops came through the door, guns drawn. "Chuck, you okay?" one of the cops asked the wounded officer. "Well, not bad for a guy who took a bullet. How'd you find me?" "The GPS locator in the car. Best thing since sliced bread." "Who did this?" the other cop asked as he approached the young man. Chuck answered him. "I don't know. The guy ran off into the dark, just dropped his gun and ran." Well, George and the young man both looked puzzled at each other. "That guy work here?" the other cop said. "Yep," George said. "Just hired him this morning. Boy lost his job." The paramedics came in and loaded Chuck onto the stretcher. The young man leaned over, whispering to the cop, "Why?" Chuck just said, "Merry Christmas, boy." "And you too, George. And thanks for everything." "Well, it looks like you got one doozy of a break there. That ought to solve some of your problems, boy." George went into the back room and came out with a box. He pulled out a ring box and said, "Here, boy, here's something for that little woman of yours. I don't think Martha would mind. She said it'll come in handy someday." The young man looked inside the box to see the biggest diamond ring he'd ever seen. "I can't take this. It means something to you." "Well, now it means something to you," replied George. "I got my memories. That's all I need." George reached into the box again. An airplane, a car, and a truck appeared. Now these were the toys the oil company had left him to sell. "Here's something for that little man of yours." The young man began to cry again as he handed back the $150 the old man had given him earlier. "And what are you supposed to buy Christmas dinner with? You keep that too," George said. "Now get home to your family." The young man turned with tears streaming down his face and said, "I'll be here in the morning for work if that job offer's still good." "Nope, I'm closed on Christmas Day." "But I'll see you the day after," George said. George turned around to find that the stranger had returned. "Where'd you come from? I thought you left." "I've been here. I've always been here," said the stranger. "You say you don't celebrate Christmas. Why is that?" "Well, after my wife passed away, I just couldn't see what all the bother was. Putting up a tree and all seemed to waste a good pine tree. Baking cookies like I used to with Martha just wasn't the same by myself. And besides, I was just getting a little chubby." The stranger put his hand on George's shoulder. "But you do celebrate the holiday, George. You gave me food and drink and warmed me when I was cold and hungry. That woman with that child, she's going to bear a son, and he'll become a great doctor. The policeman you helped will go on to save 19 people from being killed by terrorists. And the young man who tried to rob you will make you a rich man and not take any for himself. That's the spirit of the season, and you keep it as good as any man." George was taken aback by all this. Well, how do you know? How do you know all this?" "Trust me, George. I have the inside track on this sort of thing. And when your days are done, you'll be with Martha again." The stranger moved toward the door. "Now, if you'll excuse me, George, I've got to go. I have to go home where there's a big celebration planned." George watched as that old leather jacket and the torn pants that the stranger was wearing turned into a white robe, and a golden light began to fill the room. "You see, George, it's my birthday. Merry Christmas." George fell to his knees and replied, "Happy birthday, Lord Jesus." That's Christmas at the gas station.